Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, today I'm making my second video about Stryfe already, and this one is gonna be specifically dedicated why Stryfe and Aegon are nothing alike. Now, I'm not gonna say that Aegon is gonna be infinitely better than Stryfe or Stryfe is gonna be infinitely better than Aegon, but the fact of the matter is Stryfe lacks a ton of stuff that Aegon's good for, and ultimately from the first glance, aside from Everest type of content and having access to very great damage output, they actually have very little in common, and most importantly, very little in common how they are going to be used everywhere except Abyss of Legends. Like, with time, Aegon has proved himself to be one of the MVPs for for Act 6.3, 6.4, one of them, well, great for general questing these days as well when content gets longer and longer, and that is because of certain piece of utility that Aegon has. Now, granted, Stryfe has different piece of utility, however, that ability set, in my opinion, is significantly weaker, or at the very least, different from Aegon. So, overall, this video is going to be pointing out differences in between Aegon and Stryfe, and kind of showcasing some of the things where Aegon has definitely a strong upper hand. Now, I cannot ignore the fact, obviously, that Stryfe has other abilities, obviously, that would be much harder to achieve, or some utility that would take a lot longer to get to with Aegon, like ability to bypass evade. Aegon would have to get to 150 combo in order to access True Strike. Stryfe can do that from the first hit of the fight. So there are upsides to Stryfe. However, when it comes to the most major, most important point, I think Stryfe is lacking quite significantly. Like, one of the biggest weaknesses here in Stryfe, and it's kind of unfair to call it a weakness, but let's call it a lack of utility. Stryfe has absolutely zero immunities. He's immune to absolutely nothing, and whereas obviously he's a mutant character, therefore with the help of Apocalypse and Professor X, eventually he can become immune to bleed damage and highly poison resistant, for example, but that would require significant setup and investment in the team building. However, compared to this champion, this OG Everest content GOAT, and he will still be the best champion for Everest content in my opinion, Aegon is effectively pseudo-immune to everything, and I'm talking about his tenacity abilities that he gets at, I believe, 5 hits, and then at 100 hits, enhanced version of, where critical hits have 100% chance to shrug off 1 debuff. And that is very big part of why Aegon is a good questing champion, and why he puts in a lot of work in Act 6, because if you do have a chance to ramp him up, you can use him as immune to everything champion. He can shrug off Incinerates, Shocks, Bleeds, Poisons. You can use him against Morningstars. You can do whatever the hell you want with him. And that is crucial. In addition to being able to shrug off, let's say, Suicide debuffs. Whereas Aegon is 100% more friendly to Suicide Masteries, which I'm going to explain a bit later as well. But this ability is very important, and it provides Aegon with a large amount of utility. To name some of the most crucial examples, I believe, whenever we encounter Void with stuff like long distance relationship, and if the Void is stacked, then you have very few good options, very few good matchups for those fights, and Aegon is one of them, via his ability to shrug off debuffs. And I'm sure if we revisit my Act 6 guide videos, or even Act 7 guide videos, I often name drop Aegon as a possible option because of this ability, because of his ability to get rid of all of the debuffs, any debuffs, and that is insane. That is one of the strongest pieces of utility in game, and Stryfe doesn't have that. Therefore, there will be a ton of circumstances where you do want to, for instance, use Aegon or flat out immune champion to something, and Stryfe cannot compete with that. Now, the second point I'm going to move on to, obviously, is going to be Suicide Masteries. Now, Aegon, one of the most beautiful things about him is that he's 100% Suicide Mastery compatible, because not only he can shrug off these debuffs, he doesn't rely on special spamming in his ramp-up process at all whatsoever. In fact, if you forget that special attack button exists on Aegon, you lose exactly 0 of his utility. Well, you lose access to bleed debuff, but it doesn't matter in Aegon's case most of the time, because all of his abilities work on your regular combos, versus Stryfe has to spam special attacks, or if not, if he maybe doesn't have to, it's definitely recommended. So that's a big difference where Aegon takes upper hand. But it goes even further than that. Because of this reliance on gaining power and being able to drop special attacks, again, significantly limits champions. And I have spoken about it at length, where I explain why champions like Archangel, for instance, are as popular as they are, because Archangel is another champion that loses exactly nothing by being unable to spam his special attacks and just heavy the fight victory. Aegon is a similar champion. Corvus functions very similar in a lot of fights where you just need access to basic combos, and specials are nice but not always mandatory. Similar to Ghost, quite similar to Omega Red, so on and so forth, but it's quite seldom that you have crazy good champions that mandatorily demand you to use special attacks, and Stryfe is one of them. And what's even worse, he kind of demands you to get to level 3 if you want a quick ramp up, and also level 1. So there's going to be a lot of power usage going on. To name a few nodes, but I'm sure if you guys would take a look in the quest, one of the 2020 themes was screw with your power bar. We see power struggle frequently, which would put Stryfe in a condition specifically described in developer's note, where you don't want to use special attack once the opponent has 1 bar of power. In power struggle conditions, that's the only time you can use special attack, so effectively Stryfe's special 1 ramp up is made redundant and useless. Now we have nodes like Static Blast, which always reduces the gain of your power, and in previously mentioned power struggle, you're unable to use level 3, for instance. And if you're unable to use level 3, your ramp up is significantly increased and made made impossible if you're unawakened, but made significantly longer even with awakened ability. And that, unfortunately, definitely also for Stryfe means that there are going to be a ton more nodes you can't quite achieve the results that you want. Even when you go in your standard incursions, it's not uncommon to see power lock 1, power lock 2 nodes. Now we have these Langer nodes, or even a simple node that was Special Connoisseur. No, not Special Connoisseur. The one where you need to throw different special attacks or you lose half health. I forgot the name of that. But the point being is, there's a ton of abilities out there, ton of nodes out there that prevent you from using special attacks really. Stryfe will suffer for that. And one of the good things about Aegon is that he didn't care for it at all. In fact, he didn't care if you spend the entire fight without throwing a single special attack or being able to throw a single special attack. Now, again, there are things that obviously Stryfe will do better than Aegon. Like, as I mentioned in my first video, where he is not going to take any damage with his psionic blasts. And you can access that from the very first hit of the first fight. That's crazy. Aegon needs to get to 150 combo to unlock true accuracy, and then he needs to get to 500 combo to reduce opponent's ability accuracy. So Stryfe has that over Aegon in any short piece of content. That's amazing. And there are different things that Stryfe can go invisible and how opponents miss attacks. That's great. As I said, there are different utilities which Stryfe will have. But some of the most important things that make Aegon an Aegon are definitely lacking there. And even though it's very easy, very quick to draw comparisons to Aegon, I think that comparison will largely end at the point where, yes, they both have great damage, yes, they are both ramp-up champions, but both of them do it in completely different ways, and both of them are going to be used for completely different scenarios in anything but that Everest content. And Act 6 and Act 7 in variants and whatever, these two champions are diagonally different. And it's important to keep that in mind, because it's always alluring to jump on any new champion. And I like Stryfe. But it's important to know that if you're going to be going for Stryfe, you're going to be opening crystals for Stryfe, you're not going for mutant Aegon. You're going for Stryfe. Aegon is Aegon, and you're not getting an Aegon. You're getting a great damage dealing champion. That's very different in key aspects, in key mechanics, in key playstyles to Aegon. So if Aegon's what you need, you should go for Aegon. If Stryfe is what you like, you should go for Stryfe. But do not mix the two. And that is kind of the moral of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know what you guys think. So yeah.